I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to keep secrets. I used to pride myself on my honesty, on the way I'd always speak my mind, even if it made people uncomfortable. But life has a way of testing your principles. And when it came to my marriage, I failed that test in a way I still carry the weight of every single day. My name is Rachel. I've been married to Daniel for 12 years. We met in college. He was confident, charming, the kind of man who could turn heads when he walked into a room. I was the bookish type, always tucked away in a corner with a novel or scribbling in my journal. Somehow we worked. He brought the excitement and I brought the steadiness. We balanced each other, or at least that's what I believed for a long time. The first few years of our marriage were beautiful in the way that only the early stages of love can be. We traveled. We dreamed together. We built a small but cozy home in a quiet neighborhood just outside Seattle. Daniel worked in sales, always on the road chasing clients, making deals. I worked from home as a freelance editor. The arrangement gave me time to focus on the things I loved, including our home. But as time passed, something began to shift. Daniel's job, once thrilling and full of potential, became an excuse for absence. He was always away. Conferences, business dinners, urgent flights to Los Angeles or Chicago. First, I didn't question it. I trusted him. I believed in him. But trust isn't something that stays untouched if it isn't nurtured. I started noticing things. Missed calls that went unanswered. Messages that felt vague. He'd get defensive over harmless questions. Where he was, who he was with, why he didn't answer when I called at 10 p.m. He always had an excuse. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that marriages go through phases. But even as I told myself those things, I felt it slipping. Not just him, but us. We stopped having dinner together. He stopped asking me about my day. I stopped telling him about mine. We became strangers living under the same roof, saying good morning and good night, but nothing more. The loneliness crept in slowly, like fog rolling in over a quiet lake. I didn't even notice it at first. I started spending more time at the local library, sometimes just wandering the aisles aimlessly. I joined a writing club just to have a reason to talk to someone during the week. I buried myself in work editing manuscript after manuscript, desperate to fill the silence that had wrapped itself around my life. It was at that writing club that I met Chris. Chris was a quiet man, maybe a few years older than me, with kind eyes and a gentle voice. He wasn't the kind of person who demanded attention. He listened more than he spoke. And when he did speak, he always had something meaningful to say. He was working on a memoir about his mother who had passed away the year before. It was raw, emotional, full of grief and honesty. We started chatting after meetings, just short conversations at first. He'd ask about my thoughts on a chapter, and I'd share my opinion. I admired how open he was about pain, how he wasn't afraid to write the uncomfortable truths. We connected over our love of language, over our shared understanding of loneliness. He too had been through a broken marriage. His wife had left him 5 years ago. He didn't speak badly of her, just said it was complicated and that he'd learned to live with it. I didn't plan on it happening. I didn't wake up one day and decide I was going to emotionally connect with another man. But that's what happened. One moment at a time. A glance that lingered too long. A conversation that went a little deeper than it should have. Texts exchanged late at night under the covers while Daniel was snoring beside me. I told myself we were just friends. I told myself that I needed someone to talk to, that there was no harm in it. But deep down I knew I was crossing a line. It wasn't physical, not at first, but it was emotional, and that's sometimes worse. Chris made me feel seen again. He noticed things about me that Daniel hadn't noticed in years. He remembered the names of my favorite authors. He asked about my writing. He read my edits and told me they were brilliant. He made me feel like I mattered, like I was still alive. I tried to pull away. Guilt nodded at me every time I looked at Daniel, even if we were distant, even if he wasn't the man I married anymore. I had made vows. I had promised to be loyal, to stand by him. But loyalty becomes hard when the other person doesn't even notice your absence. One night I confronted Daniel. It was late, past midnight, and he had just come back from another client dinner. He smelled like cologne that wasn't his. His shirt was unbuttoned halfway down. I looked at him and something inside me snapped. "Where were you?" I asked. He looked startled. "I told you, dinner with a client." "Which client?" I pressed. "Rachel, not this again." "No, this time you're going to answer." He stared at me like I had lost my mind. "Does it matter? You don't trust me, do you?" And just like that, the conversation ended. He turned his back to me and walked upstairs. I stood there in the living room, my fists clenched, my heart racing, and I realized he wasn't even trying anymore. From that point on, everything spiraled. Chris and I grew closer. We started meeting outside of the writing club. Coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into long walks. I still hadn't crossed that final line, but I knew I was on the edge of it. And the worst part, I didn't feel guilty anymore. I felt angry. Angry at Daniel for giving up. Angry at myself for staying. But then something happened that changed everything. One morning, Daniel left his laptop open on the dining table. He never did that. He was meticulous about his privacy. But that morning, I guess he was in a rush. The screen had gone dark, but it wasn't locked. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe instinct, maybe desperation. But I opened it. I didn't have to dig far. There in his email was a thread with a woman named Lisa. Dozens of messages, flirty, suggestive, some even dated back 2 years. My hands trembled as I read them. My stomach turned. It wasn't just one woman. There were more. Different names, different dates, photos, reservations, hotels. He had been cheating on me for years. I sat there staring at the screen, the weight of betrayal crashing down on me like a tidal wave. I had suspected, but seeing it, reading it was different. It was real and it was devastating. I didn't cry. Not immediately. I felt numb. Then after a while I felt cold. Like a part of me had frozen solid. That was the moment everything shifted. That was the moment I stopped feeling guilty because he had already burned the house down. I had just been standing in the ashes. But I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. Not right away. I closed the laptop, wiped my fingerprints off the keyboard like it was a crime scene, and went about my day. I made coffee. I answered emails. I even smiled when Daniel called to say he'd be home late. Because from that moment on, I knew something he didn't. And I was going to make sure he regretted everything. Not with shouting, not with drama, with revenge. The kind that cuts deeper than any affair ever could. I wish I could say I handled it with grace, that I stood up, packed my bags, and left Daniel behind like a heroine in one of those empowerment novels. But that's not how life works. Not for people like me. I'd spent 12 years building a life with him. 12 years of routines, shared friends, holiday traditions, and birthdays. You don't just walk away from that in a day, even when you have every reason to. But I didn't want to just walk away. I wanted him to feel it. The betrayal, the silence, the disbelief. I wanted him to taste the bitterness of being lied to, cheated on, dismissed like he didn't matter. I wanted him to know exactly how it felt when your whole world turns upside down and no one's coming to catch you. So I played the long game. I spent the next few weeks pretending everything was normal. I smiled more. I laughed at his dry jokes. I made his favorite meals, asked about his day, and kissed him goodnight. He didn't suspect a thing. If anything, he probably thought we were reconnecting. Maybe he believed his lies had faded into the past, and that I was the same old Rachel who waited for him with dinner on the table and a soft smile on her face. But inside I was making plans. I started gathering proof, screenshots, printouts, dates, locations. I built a folder and hid it deep in my external hard drive under a decoy name. Tax Docs 2016. I didn't want just one affair to be revealed. I wanted the full scope. I needed evidence in case things got legal or messy, And knowing Daniel, things would get messy. Around this time, I started spending more time with Chris. He didn't know about what I found. Not at first. I didn't want to drag him into something before I figured out what I was going to do. But he could tell something had changed in me. I wasn't just lonely anymore. I was angry, focused, determined. One afternoon, we were walking through a park, golden leaves falling around us like confetti, when he finally asked, "Are you okay, Rachel?" "Really?" I stopped walking and looked at him. His face was calm, patient, but his eyes were full of concern. I didn't answer right away. I just nodded slowly and said, "I'm working on something, and when it's done, I'll finally be okay." That was the first time I let myself believe it. That I could come out on the other side of this stronger than before. Not just surviving, winning. Chris respected my space. He didn't push. But I think he knew. He knew something inside me had shifted, and he stood by, ready if I needed him. Meanwhile, at home, Daniel was deep into his double life. I knew his routines by now. The work trips that were really weekends in a hotel with someone named Emily or Julia. The sudden need to shower the moment he came home. The phone that never left his pocket. He was too comfortable, too confident. That was his first mistake. One night while he was in the shower, I used his thumb to unlock his phone. He didn't even stir. That's how much he underestimated me. Inside the phone I found texts, photos, bookings. I forwarded them to an email I'd created months earlier. One he didn't know about. Evidence at Proton Mail. It was all there, time-stamped and irrefutable. Now I had everything I needed. But I wasn't done. See, Daniel was a partner at a mid-sized firm. Reputation mattered to him. His clients trusted him. He had always bragged about how image was everything in business. And I knew just the right people who would be very interested in his extracurricular activities. But I didn't go nuclear right away. I started smaller. First, I called his mother. We hadn't spoken in months. Our relationship had always been strained. But she respected me. She liked the illusion of the perfect daughter-in-law. I knew she would hate hearing what her son had been doing, but she'd believe me because I had proof. I sent her a PDF file, told her not to open it until we got off the phone. When she did, there was a long silence. Then she whispered, "Oh my God." I told her everything, the multiple women, the lies, the years of it. I didn't cry. I just laid it all out, calm and composed. She apologized. She said she didn't know what to say. And then she said something I'll never forget. "Rachel, you didn't deserve this." She promised not to tell Daniel. That was crucial. I wanted him to remain unaware of what was coming. Next, I contacted a lawyer quietly, discreetly, not to file anything yet, but to understand my options. I wanted to know what divorce would look like if I chose it, how much I was entitled to, what my chances were if things turned ugly. Then I talked to our mutual friends, the ones I trusted. I didn't tell them everything, but I started planting seeds. Comments like, "Daniel's been acting different lately," or, "I feel like he's not being honest with me." I wanted the foundation to crack before I broke it entirely. But the real plan, the one I kept secret even from Chris, was what I call the mirror moment. I decided to give Daniel a taste of his own medicine. Not by cheating. No, that would have been too easy, too obvious. I wanted something more poetic. So I wrote a story. A fictional story. Or at least that's what everyone believed. I published it online under a pseudonym. It was about a woman whose husband cheats on her for years. She finds out, stays silent, and slowly destroys his life from the inside. In the story, the husband's clients pull away. His friends stop returning calls. His mother disown him, and by the time he realizes what's happening, it's too late. He's ruined. The story went viral. People praised the narrator, called her brilliant, cold, strategic. I read the comments at night, smiling quietly to myself. Then one day I printed it out, placed it in an envelope, and left it on Daniel's desk. When he came home that night, I watched him write it. He didn't say anything, just read slowly line by line. His face changed as he got deeper. First confused, then curious, then pale. He looked up and asked, "What is this?" I shrugged. "Just something I read. Thought it was interesting." He didn't speak for a full minute. Then he said, "Is this about me?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "Should it be?" He left the room without answering. That night he didn't sleep. I heard him pacing in the hallway, checking his phone, whispering into it. I knew then he was rattled good. That was just the beginning. The next week, I accidentally sent one of the screenshots to a group chat with some of his colleagues. I claimed it was a mistake. Meant to send that to my cousin. Sorry. But the damage was done. Within days, word started spreading. Daniel came home agitated, short-tempered, snapping at little things. He knew something was wrong, but he couldn't prove I was behind it. He didn't even know I knew. That's what made it beautiful. Chris, bless him, stayed by my side the whole time. He still didn't know all the details, but he supported me. We never crossed that final line. There was no affair, just friendship, real and honest and healing. I needed that. Eventually, Daniel asked if we could go to counseling. He said he felt like we were drifting, like I wasn't present, like he wanted to fix things. It took everything in me not to laugh. I agreed to go, not because I believed in it, but because I wanted to see him squirm. In that therapist's office, he tried to play the role of the loving husband, the victim. He talked about work stress, about how I had changed. Then the therapist asked me, "Rachel, what do you want from this marriage?" And I said calmly, "I want the truth." Daniel froze. That was the turning point. He knew I knew. He just didn't know how much. By the end of that session, he was sweating and I was just getting started. The silence in the car after that therapy session was louder than any argument we'd ever had. Daniel gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. I stared out the window, calm and composed. I had said only 5 words. I want the truth, but they landed like a grenade in his carefully constructed world. He didn't speak for the rest of the night. He kept looking at me like he was trying to read what I knew, but he wouldn't ask. Cowards never do. The next morning I woke up before him, packed my bag quietly, and went to stay with a friend. I left no note, no message, just absence. That was the beginning of the end. In the weeks that followed, everything I'd set in motion began to unfold. His colleagues distanced themselves. He was quietly removed from a client pitch he'd been preparing for months. Whispers filled the office halls about the story, the screenshots, the rumors no one dared say aloud, but everyone believed. His mother stopped calling. Friends stopped inviting him places. Even the women he thought he was juggling started ghosting him. I had made sure some of them knew they weren't the only ones. One of them even messaged me to apologize. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Chris eventually learned the full truth. I told him everything one quiet evening, sitting on the balcony, wine in hand. He listened without interrupting, without judging. When I finished, he didn't offer advice or pity. He just said, "You did what you had to do, and you did it with more strength than most people ever could." Daniel tried calling, texting, even begging to meet. He wanted to explain. He even tried playing the victim again, saying he was losing everything. I let him lose it. That was the point. I didn't file for divorce right away. I waited until his firm passed him over for partner, until his reputation was too damaged to repair. Then I served him the papers, clean, cold, and final. There was no big courtroom drama, no fight. He knew he didn't stand a chance. I walked away with my dignity intact, my peace of mind restored, and more importantly, my power. Some might say revenge is petty, but mine wasn't about destruction. It was about clarity. It was about standing in front of the man who underestimated me, betrayed me, and letting him watch as I walked away. Stronger, freer, and no longer his. He lost me the moment he thought I was blind. But I was never blind. I was patient. And in the end, I didn't just survive him. I outsmarted him.